So name of the reading is non-parametric approaches. It builds on to what we did in the previous reading. It's a small reading, should take us about at tops 60, 70 minutes. And then after the reading gets over, I have written about 15 odd practice questions. We would practice them and more or less it's done. For those people who would be viewing this video later on, these practice questions would be added in the form of a quiz, and video solutions would be added below them when you select a particular answer. So you can practice the quiz which is available below this particular video. Now, very broadly, what non-parametric really means. So we know that if I have a set of data, right? And what I do is I take this data and I make some sort of assumptions with respect to the data. Now, what do you mean by assumptions and what kind of assumptions are these going to be? So if you make assumption that, let's say your data is normally distributed with, particular mean or variance. The moment you say, my data set is normally distributed, then you're kind of imposing very strict restrictions on your data set, right? Then your data set has to look symmetric. It has to have, skewness of 0, kurtosis of 3. So then when you're making these type of assumption, you're dealing with a parametric set of data. You're dealing with parametric distributions, and then you model them accordingly. You calculate your VAR accordingly. But if you want to use the given data, as it is, right? As it is, you don't want to make any assumptions. So no assumptions. So use the data as it is. You're not going to make any assumptions whatsoever. Then we say we are dealing with the non-parametric approach for VAR or AS calculations. Okay, and of course the most important approach within the non-parametric world, where the entire session would be spent on today, is the historical simulation, right? So that's what we really focused on today. Is we are looking at historical simulation, and we'd look at 4 different ways in which you can simulate your data, and then how do you calculate VAR, and that's it. So not much of a calculation, mostly theory, mostly conceptual reading, but a fun reading. All right. So with this background, let's get started. I've thrown in a little bit of introduction here. So with non-parametric approaches, the distribution is not specified. We're not saying I'm dealing with a normal distribution. We're not saying we are dealing with a student's tree distribution. It is data driven. It is data driven. There are no assumptions. No assumption driven analysis. Okay, so this is a very broad introduction to what we're getting into. Now, the first learning outcome, what we want to do is we want to do something called as the process of bootstrapping. Okay, I mean, I first learned this concept when I was trying to learn machine learning techniques. I was kind of studying machine learning so that I could teach it for a course. I don't know much about machine learning yet. I'm still taking baby steps. But what is the idea of bootstrap? It's a phenomenal concept, and it's very simple, very intuitive. There's nothing complicated about it. So the way a bootstrap works is like this. Okay, I'm going to probably draw that here. Let's assume that I have a sample. Let's say I have a sample of 1,000 observations. Okay, I have total 1,000 observation. What I can do with that is I can pick up a random, let's say random 600 data points from here. Okay, so I pick up first random 600 data points from here, and that would be my sample 1. And what I would do with that sample 1 is I will calculate, let's say, if I'm working with VAR, then I will calculate VAR. Let's say historically simulated VAR, doesn't matter, right? So I would calculate VAR, and let's call this as VAR 1. Then what we do is we put those 600 samples back into the 1,000 pool. Okay, and next time I take, next 600 randomly. Okay, and then what I have is I have a sample 2, right? And I have a sample 2, and from that I will have VAR 2. Then you put those 600 back again, right? Put them back in the bucket. Then take one more 600, then take one more 600. And of course, I'm drawing them in a circle, but they could be random. Do you understand? Like I can pick any 600 values here and I can keep on doing, sample 3 and sample 4. And I can do a large number of, samples out of it. How many samples? Very broadly, 1000 C 600 number of samples could be drawn, right? 1000 C, C is combination. I mean, you don't have to worry about this maths, but intuitively, it's going to be a really large number, and I can keep on doing, var one, var two, var three, and var four. So what it does is, even though my sample size is small, because I'm resampling it again and again and again and again, I end up producing large number of, large number of subsamples. And then what would be my good estimate of var is I will take all these vars and then I would take an average of all these vars, right? That would be called as a bootstrapped historical simulation var. Okay. So straightforward method, nothing complicated. And can we use this for ES calculations? Yes. Can we use this for other coherent risk measures? Yes. I mean, you can use it wherever you like. So all that you need to know with bootstrapping is I have a data, I pick up a random sample, I do my calculations. Then uh, I pick up random sample again from the whole data, right? That means the previous sample is put back and then I take one more sample and then I take one more sample and I keep on doing that. This is called bootstrapping. And the name kind of makes sense because bootstrapping simply means helping yourself. And you are helping yourself here because, with just 1000 observation, you can create large number of sample space out of it. Okay, so that's bootstrapping. I hope you've understood this. Now I've put in some theory just so that we're comfortable with language. Let's read through the theory. The bootstrap technique draws a sample from the original data set, records the var from that particular sample. The bootstrap technique draws a sample from the original data set, records var from that sample, and returns the data, right? So what you do is draw a sample, calculate the var, right? And return data. Return data means don't remove that data from the original, data set. Let it be there. And then what you need to do is repeat this process over and over and over again, right? So that you get multiple var. Then what would be your best var? Your best var estimate is simply going to be the average of all the vars that you've calculated using the bootstrapping process. The same procedure can be performed for ES. So how will we do it for ES? We know that ES is basically some sort of a mean of, different values inside the tail. So for every sample, I can calculate a ES, right? I can calculate a var, divide the tail region into the quantiles, take an average of that. That's my ES. And then I can keep on repeating this process. Now, there is a lot of empirical evidence backing this. Okay. And in this reading, we'll have to be a little careful with this empirical part because there could be theory questions which says, which one is empirically okay. Something might be theoretically correct, but is it showing good results with empirical analysis? So I've covered most of it in presentation, and few concepts I've intentionally not done in presentations. We'll do them with the help of questions in the quiz section. So empirical analysis, it demonstrates the bootstrapping technique consistently provides more precise estimates of coherent risk measure than running simulation raw data alone, right? That means bootstrapping technique provides more precise estimates, high quality estimates compared to what? Compared to using historical simulation on raw data alone, because then you just do it once. As against that, bootstrapping is providing you more high quality estimates. All right. So if you understood this, your first learning outcome is out of the way. Can you guys raise your hands if you're comfortable with this? Okay, for some reason I can't see the hand raises also. But I'm going to assume you are, and I'm going to jump on to the next learning outcome now. Now, next learning outcome is describe historical simulation using something called as a non-parametric density estimation. Okay, so I'm just going to call this as NDE So I don't have to repeat that word again and again. Non-parametric density estimation, or NDE. Now, what is this? Okay, so again, it's simple. Imagine if you have, imagine if you have 100 observations. Okay, you have 100 observations, and you want to calculate, let's say, a 5% or a 95% VAR. How would you do it? You would say 100, into 5 percentage, right, plus 1. So your historically simulated VAR would be sixth observation, correct? And if you want to just go and find out what the sixth observation is, these are discrete values, discrete 100 observation, sixth observation. There's no problem. You can easily go and find out what the sixth observation is going to be. But as against that, imagine a scenario, right? So what scenario? So imagine you have 100 observations, but you, for some reason, you want a 4.2 percentage VAR. Okay, you want a 4.2 percentage VAR. Now, how are you going to do it? So you're going to say 100 into 4.2 percentage, 100 into 4.2 percentage plus 1. Okay, so that's going to be 5th.2th observation. But how would you find out 5th.2th observation? We can not find this with discrete data. We cannot find this with discrete data. Agree? We can't, right? 5.2 observations, we cannot do it. I can either find 5, I can find 6, I cannot do 5.2. So you would say, how about doing some sort of a linear interpolation? And that's where this is taking us to. So all that NDE does is, it tries to convert. It gives us ways to convert. It tries to convert a discrete data to some sort of a continuous data set. And of course, once we have a continuous data set, then what we have is a probability density function, like a normal distribution, and then it makes it easy. Okay, so that's the job of an NDE, to somehow convert discrete data to some sort of a continuous data. Now, how do we do it? So there is an easy method. Okay, and then there is an easy method. That's one way of doing it. Or there are super tough mathematical ways to do it. Super tough mathematical ways to do it. Okay, now what would be an easy method? Easy method is like this. Take your data and convert that to a histogram. Histogram would look a little bit like this, right? That's how histogram looks like. So take the histogram, and kind of plot your data there. Then what you do is you take the midpoints of these histograms. Of course, now if you have to decide the, if you want to build a histogram, you'll have to decide the bin width. Now, what do you mean by bin width? This is a bin width, right? How are you going to define that? So that's a bin width, correct? This is bin width. This is bin width. So you'll have to take a few decisions, decide your bin width. Then you take the center point of, these, okay? And then what you do is you simply connect this center point, okay? Connect these center points with some sort of a straight line, okay? So connect the midpoints, with a straight line, or maybe even a curve, right? Maybe even a curve, right? You can kind of try to do it a little bit like this, try to add some curve to it. If you want to do it with a curve, you're going to need some fancy softwares to achieve this. The authors in the core reading, they basically recommended making use of MATLAB, right? There's a inbuilt function in the MATLAB which can achieve this kind of a stuff for you. So that's one way to do it. Or the more fancier mathematical ways to do it is to make use of something called as the kernels. Now it's again conceptually it's similar to what you do. You want to break down your data set and connect them through smoother curves, but they give you a lot of a lot of mathematical power to achieve this. And then there are a lot of types of kernels. It's not just one, right? It's not that you're just breaking it down into it's just one method. There are different types proposed by different people. Now what author says and what I'm writing now is super important for your exams. Okay, so what author says is that these are theoretically theoro, theoretically uh, theoretically correct. These are more appropriate from a theory perspective, but uh, but uh, but not necessarily not necessarily uh, useful in practice. Okay, so even though these are theoretically correct but not necessarily bring in significant value in practice, a lot of empirical backtesting suggests that even an easy method like this will do the job. So you can use more fancier mathematical ways of doing it. How to do it is out of your syllabus. You can do it, but as far as empirical data suggests, even a simple easy method of connecting midpoints with straight lines will do the job. Okay, so that is your NDE. If you've understood this, we just need to get through the theory and then we are good with this. So let's start going through the theory carefully. Discreteness of the data. Discreteness of the data does not allow for estimation of HS of VAR between data points. Does not allow VAR between data points, as we discussed, 4.2. If there are 100 observations, we can do a 95, we can do a 96, but we cannot do a 95.5. One of the advantages of non-parametric density function is that the underlying distribution is free from restrictive assumption. So we can use the existing data points and then we can smooth those data points so that we can do the VAR calculations. The simplest way to do is to connect the midpoints. Okay, so I've already discussed this with you. Simplest way to do it is just to connect the midpoints. Okay, like this, and then you get your PDF. Now, following this logic, one can see that linear adjustment is simple solution to the interval problem. A more complicated adjustment would involve connecting curves rather than lines to better capture the characteristics. But again, I told you, you can connect the curves, but then you probably want to make use of some sort of a software to achieve this. Okay, this is more or less what you need to know. If you know this, job done. Okay, so I'm going to take you to now the next learning outcome. Let me just pop up your chat box to see everything is working well. Yeah. Are you guys comfortable with my speed? Are you following what's happening? All right, good. So again, I'm getting rid of your chat box for a while. Once I finish this, then I'll open a window for Q&A. Let's go to the next learning outcome. Compare and contrast. Now we have to look at 4 methods. Age weighted, okay, volatility weighted, correlation weighted, and the filtered historical simulation approaches. So we have 4 approaches to deal with: age, vol, correlation, and FHS, filtered historical simulation approach. Now, what is this and why do we need it? It's very simple. There's no complication here. Imagine I want to calculate a VAR. Okay. So what I do is I have a data of 500 days with me, but I decided why should I use 500? Doesn't make sense. The data is very old. So arbitrarily decide that I will make use of the last 200 observations. Okay. So if I'm going to make last 200 observation, I will arrange the data from, the lowest to highest and then, calculate my VAR. One of the things that I'm doing is, the 500 days of data that I had, I decided not to use the first 300 days. That means I assign this some sort of an arbitrary zero weight. Correct. I mean, I did not take that data. That means I'm taking a zero weight. And then the 200 days of data that I used for historical simulation purposes, for me, it doesn't matter whether it's a 195th day old data or yesterday's data. If it's within 200, for me, all the values are equally important, correct? So that means what I did here is I assumed an equal weight of 1 by 200 for each of the data point. And you can see the problem here, right? The problem here is we are taking data of 200. Why not 201st data? Correct? It's arbitrary. There's no logic to why I should not take the 201st data. So that's one. Second, why assign equal weight to every observation? Maybe the more recent observations are more important and the previous observations are less important, isn't it? So why assign equal weight? So then different methods have been built to kind of fix these problems as against the traditional simple HS method. Okay, and which are those four methods which are being built? So the first method is age weighted. So how old the data is. Second is wall weighted. Beautiful method. We'll see what it means. I'll take you through it. The second method is the correlation method. Okay, now this gets a little more complicated maths wise, but luckily we don't have to do the maths. We just need to understand what's happening here. Okay, so correlation method. And then this is like the hi-fi method, right? This is the most useful, but also the most complicated method to achieve, where you need to do multiple steps. So age, wall, correlation, and filter. Now, before I take you through each of these methods, I'm just going to summarize them in one go. So what's happening in the age method is very simple. What you need to do is you need to assign some sort of a probability weight to every return observation. Okay. You need to assign some sort of a probabilistic weight to every return observation. Now, if you're doing a historical simulation, I'll probably give you a demo on an Excel file. Okay, so let's create this file for you. And let's say weights using historical simulation. All right. Now, nothing complicated here. Let's take, let's take some random data. Part 2, which is hybrid. So let's say this is the day, and this is the return data. Okay, and we will start with yesterday's data, and then day before yesterday, and day before that. In this way, I will probably take 100 data points. Okay, let's take 200. Doesn't matter. So let's take 200 data points. Okay, these are my 200 data points. Now, what's the return data? I'll use a random function to generate my return data. So I'll take a ran between. Let's have a return data between -5% and maybe Okay, let's have a little more. Minus 12%, 2 plus 5%. Okay, these are my daily returns. Let's simulate the returns here. Let's see what values have we received. Okay, Excel is doing something here. Fair enough. I'll get rid of the percentage sign and just put in a percentage sign here. So this is my return data. And you can see that what's happening to my return data is, what's happening to my return data here is return data is continuously changing because I have a rand between function there, right? So I'm going to do an absolute paste of this data. So control copy, control V, just the values. Okay. So now this is an absolute freeze. Now, before I start manipulating this data, I will copy it one more time for the hybrid approach or age-weighted approach. So we'll have to do the calculation. We'll have to do the calculation twice. Okay. So first we'll do it for the weights using the historical simulation. Now what I need to do here is I need to, did I copy paste it? No, okay, wait. What I need to do here in the historical simulation approach is I need to first arrange this data, okay, in the from the lowest to the highest, and it's unfortunate I have so many minus 12. So many minus 12 here. My answer will end up being minus 12. Okay, fair enough, no problem. Let me just change some of them. I can't. Fair enough, I'm just going to work with what I have here, okay? So this is my written data. Now what I need to do is I need to assign them the weights. Now how will I assign the weights? So I will say 1 divided by count. How many total observations do I have? So the total number of observations that I have, it looks like about 200. So total observations that I have is 200. So the weight that I'm getting for each observation, is 0.5, and it's going to be the same weight for everything. It doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's going to be exactly the same weight for every observation. All right. Now, what I want to do is I want to start doing cumulative weights. Okay, cumulative weights, because the data is anyways organized in a low to high kind of a thing. So my cumulative weight here is just this, and here it's going to be sum of, let me write a formula. And what I have to do is I have to freeze the second row. Okay. So, and then let's just expand this formula everywhere. And there you go. So these are my cumulative weights. So, which means if I need a 5% var, I'm probably going. This is the 5% region of the tail, right? This is my tail. Can you observe? This is my tail. So, if I need a 5% var, I will take that 5.5% probability value, and I will say the 5% var in this instance is coming out to be minus 12, right? That's going to be my 5% var using simple historical simulation method. And which day did I pick up? I picked up the value of 151 days ago from today, right? That point was my var, and this is my tail. Now in this case, my ES will also turn out to be same, because even if I take all of these values, my ES will be same, right? But you get the point. What we do in a historical simulation is we assign equal weight to every observation irrespective of the date. And clearly, you can imagine the problems in this method, right? The problems in this method is the most recent observation should get a little more weight and the older observation should get a little less weight. So we try to solve that problem in age-weighted approach. In your FRM Part 1 curriculum, this was also called the hybrid approach. Now to achieve this, what you will have to do is first you will have to define a parameter called as the lambda. Okay, what is the lambda? It's some sort of a persistence parameter. Okay, so let's assume that my lambda parameter turns out to be 0.7. Okay, so my lambda parameter turns out to be 0.7, and then here is how we calculate the weights. Here's how we do the math. Please look at the math carefully. So the formula we use is weight is equal to the lambda parameter, okay, of I observation. So ith weight of an ith observation, like the number of days. So lambda parameter uh, of the ith observation. So we'll say I minus 1. Okay, so lambda raised to I minus 1 multiplied with 1 minus lambda, okay, divided by 1 minus lambda raised to n. Okay, this is how we're going to define the formula, that whatever is the observation minus 1. Okay, so for example, if I'm calculating weight of 2, it would be lambda raised to 2 minus 1 into 1 minus lambda divided by 1 minus lambda raised to n being the total observation. That's how we define the weights. So if you've understood this formula, and you will have to remember it, if I were you, at this moment, I would probably write down this formula onto a post-it, so that when I'm trying to recall, it's a little easier for me. Just a minute. Okay, so let's do the weights calculation now. Okay, so weights calculation is going to be like this. I'll have to be careful with building this formula. So E is equal to, let's do the numerator first, 0.7. Okay, we'll have to freeze this, multiplied with, no, not multiplied with, raised to another bracket for the exponent, this minus 1, right? So when I do it for the first observation, it becomes 0.7 raised to 1 minus 1, which doesn't make a big difference for the first one, multiplied with, now it shouldn't end up okay, so let me close this bracket here, multiplied with 1 minus 0.7 again, 1 minus 0.7, bracket close. Let me build a super bracket on top of this to divide numerator denominator. Doesn't matter, but I'll still do it. 1 minus 0.7, again putting up a freeze, raised to count number of observations that we have, in this instance 200. And again, I need to freeze this thing. Okay, it looks like we've done this. Okay, enter. All right, I will know if it's okay if my total comes out to be 100%. Let's check that. Yeah, good job. Okay, so we built weights here. Let's convert them to percentage. All right, and look at how beautiful this method is, right? Look at what happened in the previous one. Irrespective of which day observation it is, your weights were varying. Like your weights were constant, 0.5, 0.5. But here, the weights are going to change. The weights are going to change depending on how recent the data is. So the most recent data will get a very heavy weight, and the older data will get very low weight. Correct? So look at this. Some of them, we're giving them very, very low weights. Let me increase decimal to maybe up to 2 points. Yeah. Look at this. Some of these are getting really, really low weights. Okay. Now what we do is, once we have calculated the weights, And then I'm going to change this data. Okay, and I'm going to say data sort. Good job. And now we've sorted all the data. Now the sequence of this data is similar to the historical weights, similar to this sequence, right? Look at this: minus 12, 12, 12, then minus 11, 11, 11, minus 12, 12, 12, and minus 11, and so on. And then I will start doing cumulative weights in the tail. Okay, cumulative weights. Starting from here to here, putting a freeze on the second row, so it always picks up value from the beginning. And then let's just extrapolate this. Okay, so we have a lot of probabilities which are kind of 0, 0 here. Let me throw in one more decimal. Okay, so 5%. So from here to here, we're directly jumping because see, one of them came out to be a very recent observation, 4-day old. So it had a 10% probability, right? So somewhere here now, you'll have to do a little bit of interpolation, and that's exactly the limitation of a traditional historical simulation, right? Your value is going to be on the left of this 11.73. So you'll have to do interpolation between minus 1, minus 12, and minus 11. So your var will come in somewhere in between. But you get the idea, right? You get the idea of how we did this. Okay, this is of course your tail on the left of your var. Okay, so this is called as a hybrid or age-weighted approach. The formula that I want you to remember is lambda raised to I minus n into 1 minus lambda divided by 1 minus lambda raised to n. I'll also write down an example for you so you feel more comfortable with this. For example, let's say weight of second observation. Weight of second observation is going to be equal to lambda raised to 2 minus 1 multiplied, and what was the lambda in our example? We took 0.7. So 0.7 raised to 2 minus 1 multiplied with 1 minus 0.7 divided by 1 minus 0.7 raised to, we had 200 observations in this example. So I'm going to do this manually now. 0.7 into 0.3 STO1, that's my numerator. 0.7 raised to 200, making it positive STO2, RCL1 divided by RCL2. So I'm getting about 21%. I'm getting about 0.21. Is that the same number that you're getting? Yes, that's your weight for the second observation. So the more recent observations will get higher weight. Okay, this is your historical simulation method with age-weighted approach. So this is done. Let's write down the formula. The formula here is weight for observation I is equal to lambda raised to I minus 1 multiplied with 1 minus the lambda value divided by 1 minus lambda value raised to n. Okay, this is your age-weighted historical simulation. Easy. Now, what would be a volatility-weighted approach? So here, what you want to remember is that in a volatility-weighted approach, historical returns, okay, historical returns are adjusted to something called as R square, sorry, R star, or an asterisk above that, by making some wall adjustments. So what we do is we take the historical return as it is, but we do some modification on top of it. So we do that modification and then we say R star. Now, how do you calculate an R star? Very simple. R star is equal to actual R multiplied with sigma divided by sigma. That's it. But then which sigma, where do we use? So this is a true observed daily volatility. Now, what has been the current volatility in market? True observed daily volatility. So what was the volatility today at time t? Okay, so we will use that. Whereas here we will use volatility forecasted for today, volatility forecasted using some vol forecasting models, something like an EVMA that we did at FRM part 1 or GARCH. Okay, so what is really happening here is we're taking the historical data, but we are fine tuning the returns, based on what is the volatility associated with it. Now, why do you want to do it? For the simple reason that imagine today you've got into an environment where volatility is very high. Okay, so of course, if volatility is high, your VAR should be higher, correct? Because you might make more losses. So you take the historical return, but you say, see, my today's volatility is very high, so my numerator is high, correct? So think of this return as a loss number. Let's say something like -5. -5 multiplied with higher numerator and smaller denominator, because GARCH model or EMMA model will forecast, based on a predetermined path. They will not be able to capture that volatility clustering very easily. So this R star will become a higher number. Okay, so this is called vol weighted historical simulation. Now, the third method is correlation weighted HS. Now, how would you do a correlation weighted HS? So observe carefully. A correlation is calculated as, let's say, correlation between X and Y is calculated as covariance between X and Y divided by sigma X, sigma Y. Now, in this method, you adjusted only the sigmas, correct? In this method, covariance is adjusted, and variance is also adjusted. So therefore, you adjust the covariance and the variance both. So this is a little more sophisticated method. Okay. And what this more sophisticated method needs is, it needs some Cholesky decomposition. It also needs some very fancy matrix algebra. Okay. But we don't have to do the maths. We just need to know what we are, no maths required. We just need to know what's really happening when you're doing a correlation weighted. It's a superior method because it not only adjusts the covariance, but it will also adjust the variance there. So that's your correlation weighted HS. And the filtered HS is, we'll say it's the fanciest and most versatile method of all. And the most versatile method. And what this method does is, it does everything. It does everything. So this is kind of the best method. This is the method that the author likes. Okay, and we'll read some theory about it. But that's how you want to think of this learning outcome. Age weighted HS, vol weighted HS, correlation weighted HS, and filtered HS. Okay, now let's go and read theory of each one of them. Age weighted, you have to have a decay parameter. Of course, your decay parameter is going to be a value between 0 and 1. This is the formula you use. Now, one of the things that you try to do with this is reduce the impact of a ghost effect. What do you mean by a ghost effect, right? So imagine 200 days ago, there was a, let's say, market crash. 200 days ago, there was a market crash, and that gave you a number of -25%. Okay. And you feel that it will never happen again. But the thing is, that number is stuck in your historical simulation, right? Because you're going to take that 200. But one of the benefit with this is you will assign it a very, very low weight, correct? Now, under this method, it will have a low weight, so you kind of get rid of that. So that's the benefit of this ghost effect. I mean, that's the benefit of this method. It kind of eliminates or reduces the impact of ghost effect. Then the traditional historical simulation Okay, traditional historical simulation is nothing but a special case of weighing where you assign lambda of 1, because when you assign lambda value of 1, all the observations will get same weight. Correct, it will simply become 1 by n, like whatever number of observations you have. Next one is wall weighted. So you weight the individual observation by volatility rather than the date. Okay, what is the intuition? Intuition is if recent volatility has increased, if recent volatility is increased, then historical data will underestimate the true var. Agree? Because it will not, for example, in March 2020, in the middle of COVID, if you were to use historical data of 2019, you're making a mistake because the volatility is gone up, right? So you want to adjust your historical data with wall estimates. And how do you do it? You make use of this particular formula. We've already discussed this. And you can do var ES calculations also with the same logic. Now, what is the advantage of this method? So it incorporates volatility into forecasting model. Okay. The near term var is a little more sensible because you are incorporating current market condition. Wall adjusted return allow var estimates. This is a good one. I wanted to build a theory question around it, but I have built one question where I incorporate this sentence. Okay, so I want you to focus here. Wall adjusted returns allow var estimates. Okay, it allows var estimates that can be higher than the estimates with historical data set. Now, what does it mean? So, for example, let's say your worst return in your historical data set. Okay, worst returns in historical data set. Let's say something like -5, -3, -2, -1.8, -1.6, and so forth. Now, which one is the worst? -5. But under this method, okay, var can be higher than, I'm using an absolute value, higher than this -5, higher than as in absolute terms. Okay, like I hope you get what I'm trying to say. That means you can have a var which is higher than this maximum loss. Okay, why? Because you scaled it up with the wall estimates. Correlation weighted, we make use of the matrix algebra to calculate correlation, and that's pretty much more or less what you need to know here with correlation weighted technique. Then the last one is a filtered historical simulation technique. Okay, this one has important theory, so we're going to go through it carefully. As I told you, it's the most comprehensive, but it's also most complicated method out of all of them. Okay, what this method does is, if I have to simplify this for you, what it basically does is, if you guys remember, you did have MD in your mean density estimates syllabus in your FRM part 1, but in a very simple language, what it is doing is, if your historical data is like this, okay, your historical data is a little bit like this. Okay, so we have a relative stable period, and then we have a high wall period, and then maybe we have a stable period also. Okay, this is your historical data, and today, like the most recent data is a high wall data. So what it basically tries to does is, he says today's structure of my data set, today's structure of my data set, just a minute. Okay, so today's structure of my data set is kind of closer to this behavior the market had a few days ago, right? So when I'm modeling, my these weights should have a little, this data set should have a little higher weight compared to other one, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're saying whatever is closer to today is the data that I want to use more with higher weightage compared to other data. Even if this is recent, this is not much of use to me, right? This is more relevant to what we have today. So that's broadly what we're doing here. Now what we do in this is we combine HS. Okay, so we are combining our HS. We are combining our HS with something called as a conditional wall model. Okay, in general, the popular model that is being discussed by the author is a model called asymmetric Garch. Okay, so what it does is it makes use of asymmetric wall. Now, what you mean by that is, uh, what do you mean by asymmetric arches? Wall can result, in both good ways and bad ways, right? From uh, profits and losses both. Correct. Sigma can result from profit and losses both. For example, let's say this is my data, right? And if this is zero, this is zero. So when the stock price is going up, that's actually profit, correct? And when it's going down, these are losses. Now, what you do in the asymmetric Garch is you treat losses differently and you treat profit differently. And that kind of makes sense because when I'm worried about VAR, I'm not really worried about the profit volatility. I'm worried about the loss volatility, right? So you treat profit and losses differently, and therefore asymmetric Garch is generally a superior model compared to a traditional Garch, which is a symmetric mark. And one of the benefit is the reason why losses are to be treated differently is because a lot of hedge fund data generally builds in leverage, right? And leverage will work a little differently with losses compared to profits. So asymmetric Garch is also able to capture the impact of leverage. You're going to try and keep that in at the back of your mind that asymmetric Garch is more useful with levered type of data sets, right? When you have levered assets in your portfolio. So again, coming back, in filtered HS, you're combining HS with conditional wall models like an asymmetric Garch. Okay, so it has the attraction of the traditional HS, but sophistication of changing volatility. So the model is flexible to capture conditional volatility. Today's volatility based on yesterday's, conditioned on yesterday's volatility. Volatility clustering. Volatility tends to behave together. Low wall leads to low wall, and high walls leads to high wall. Right? That's called volatility clustering. And then a surprise factor. Surprise factor, why? Because if you have a leverage, that leverage can magnify your losses manifold, right? So we can bring in that surprise factor with the help of the asymmetric effect on volatility. Okay, no maths required, but I want you to know these sentences properly. Now, if you've understood this, then let's start looking at some of the steps that we need for modeling the filtered edges. Number one, you need to forecast wall for each period. Then you want to take the realized returns, but you kind of want to divide them based on the wall. For example, in a high wall period, these were my returns. In a low wall period, these were my returns. You want to build some sort of a standardized metric where you're not looking at returns in isolation, but you're looking at returns along with associated walls with them. Okay. So that you build some sort of a relationship that when I'm in a high wall environment, these are the type of returns I get, versus when I'm in a low wall environment, these are the type of returns I get. If you're able to do that, then you go and see that what is my current wall level. What is my current wall level? Based on that, let me simulate what kind of returns I would get. It's similar to what I'm trying to show you here, right? That today is a high wall environment. Okay, so for me, these are important data points here, right? This is high wall in historical data set. So what I want to do is I want to build a relationship between volatility and returns, and standardize that this volatility leads to these type of returns, and then forecast what would have been my historical returns, assuming the wall would have been same as what the wall is today, right? You give a lot of importance to today's wall. So simulate the returns based on current wall levels, and then you do the VAR calculation based on simulated distribution. Okay, so you need to know the steps, but you don't need to really do it. Though I've written some very high quality questions on this. All right, now let's summarize this. Filtered HS, does it use bootstrapping? Yes. Remember, bootstrapping in the first learning outcome simply means redrawing the samples again and again. Okay. Results are sensitive to changing market conditions. Yes. So that's an advantage, right? They're sensitive to changing market conditions. Can they predict losses outside the historical range? Of course, yes. Big advantage, right? Maybe you've never had a loss of minus 10% in the last 200 days, but if you use this method, you might get a VAR of minus 12% possible. From a computational standpoint, the method is reasonable for large portfolios also. So even if you have a very large portfolio, you can still pull off this method. In fact, it's a recommended method for large portfolios with multiple assets. And empirical evidence supports its predictive ability. Great. Now taking you to the last learning outcome. We are almost there. After this, I'm going to give you a nice little break, and then we're going to jump on the Q&A section. Identify advantages and disadvantages of non-parametric estimation method. Expect some theory question around this. It's easy, but it's important. So let's look at the advantages. Like, what is the advantages of using these methods, right? Historical simulation. Number one, it's easy, everyone understands it, right? Intuitive, nothing complicated about it. Then you don't have to worry about skewness. You don't have to worry that my data set is not normal, I have fat tail, it doesn't matter, right? Then you don't have to do complex calculations. So avoids complex calculations. For example, building matrices or doing high dimension data sets. Data is available, so not so difficult, and you can incorporate a more complex analysis, right? You can do more complex analysis. You can do age weighting, volatility weighting, so on and so forth. These are the advantages. Disadvantages. Number one, you're dependent on historical data. Okay. Then if your historical data had volatile period, then you end up having VAR that's too high or too low, depending on what your historical data includes. Then difficult to detect a structural or regime change, pre-COVID, post-COVID. If you have a pre-COVID data, post-COVID world is different, right? So how do you capture the regime change? Then if you have a large impact event, okay, which did not occur in the sample space. For example, your sample in March 2020 would definitely not have what would be the impact of COVID on the financial assets, right? So if it's not in your sample size, what do you do about it? Then difficult to estimate losses which are larger than the maximum loss. You can do it, but it's not easy, right? You can do wall weighting or the filtered HS approach, but it's not easy, and you need data. And this is going to be a problem if the product that you have in your portfolio is completely new. For example, a future contract on Bitcoin that did not exist until a couple of years ago. So for the first time you start modeling a future contract on Bitcoin, it's going to be a little difficult for you, right? So you need to have sufficient data available. And if you've understood this, then congratulations, this reading is done for us. In terms of level of difficulty, I would say that it's moderate. From your preparation perspective, do my presentation well, read this multiple times. It's just 15 slides, okay, just 15, and then solve another 15, 20 questions that I'll be putting up in the quiz, and then more or less you're covered.